Welcome to Season 3, Episode 10 of CSS Breakdown, Book by Book. In this chapter of Michael Kimmel's The Gendered Society, we dive into the world of media, where gender isn't just portrayed, but actively constructed, commodified, and reinforced through everything from magazines to video games.
And we're kicking off this deep dive by looking back at a really chilling question, one that honestly hung heavy in the air after the terrible events at Virginia Tech back in April 2007.
That awful day when Cho Seung-hui murdered 32 people, students and professors, before killing himself.
Yeah, and it wasn't the first time we'd faced that kind of question, was it? It brought back those awful memories of Columbine, Dylan Klebold, and Eric Harris almost exactly 8 years earlier.
It's what they said, the perpetrators. I mean, that really sticks with you. As Klebold and Harris started their attack, some girls asked them, "Why are you doing this?"
And their answer was just horrifyingly clear.
"We've always wanted to do this. This is payback. We've dreamed of doing this for years. This is for all the shit you put us through. This is what you deserve."
That phrase, payback for all the shit you put us through, it immediately makes you ask, how does anyone, particularly a young man, get to that point? That level of violence and despair.
What creates that kind of rage?
Well, right after these kinds of tragedies, society scrambles for answers, often the simplest ones. We saw broadly three kinds of explanations pop up.
Okay.
The first was really focused on like a hyper-individualized psychological profile.
Yeah.
A mentally ill young man, maybe untreated, who somehow got easy access to guns.
Right, so it becomes mental illness or even just pure evil, which kind of shuts down the conversation about bigger societal issues, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It makes it about him, not about us or the context. Then there was a second reaction, which was frankly pretty pernicious and predictable.
Okay.
It shifted completely to ethnic stereotyping. Remember, we'd had 2 decades of school shootings, mostly by white kids, and race was basically never mentioned as a factor.
Right, it just wasn't part of the narrative.
But suddenly, with Cho Seung-hui, who was Asian American, the whole story flipped. People started asking, whatever happened to the model minority?
Implying that maybe the pressure of that stereotype just became too much. It's amazing how quickly that framing changed.
It is. And the third type of explanation tried to zero in on what sociologists call middle-range variables.
Yeah.
Things that might have directly triggered the explosion.
The usual suspects, I imagine.
Exactly. Violent video games, access to guns. Dr. Phil was all over TV, basically an instant expert, telling Larry King something like, common sense tells you, if these kids are playing video games, mass killing sprees, glamorized.
Right, mixing that with mental illness and rage. The susceptibility is too high, he said.
And then there was Jack Thompson, that lawyer from Florida. You remember him? He was everywhere, blaming violent video games entirely.
He claimed Cho was a big gamer, played Counter-Strike, even threatened to sue Bill Gates.
Yeah, his famous line was, "This is not rocket science. When a kid who has never killed anyone goes on a rampage and looks like the Terminator, he's a video gamer." So definitive.
But what's incredible is how fast that narrative crumbled when the actual facts came out.
It really is.
Yeah.
The police searched Cho's dorm room, found no video games, none.
His roommate even said he never saw Cho play any.
Right, so that direct link, that smoking gun the experts were pointing to, it just wasn't there.
It's almost funny in a dark way that nobody then suggested, well, maybe if he had played video games, he'd have worked out his aggression.
Exactly. It shows how easily these narratives grab hold, even without evidence. And it leads us right into this huge recurring debate we have as a society.
Does media cause violence, or does it just reflect the violence that's already out there?
We see it constantly, don't we? Gangster rap, violent video games, movies, heavy metal, even violent porn.
Yeah.
Does this stuff make people more aggressive, or is it just mirroring society?
That's the core tension.
Precisely. And this deep dive, it isn't about finding some simple answer to those awful questions about violence.
Yeah.
Our goal is much more fundamental. We want to explore how media are really central to how we even understand gender, their role in maintaining gender differences and inequality, and ultimately how they shape who we are as women and men.
It's a really complex, almost invisible relationship sometimes. We're pulling back the curtain.
We are.
So when Kimmel talks about media being a gendered institution, what does that actually mean? How does that concept help us understand how media works?
It's a really key idea. Saying media is a gendered institution puts it right alongside things like schools, families, churches, corporations, even government.
So like these other big players in society.
Exactly. Media isn't just passively showing us gender differences, it's actively involved in shaping gender. It does 3 main things, according to Kimmel.
Okay, what are they?
First, It reflects the gender differences and inequalities that already exist out there in society.
It holds up a mirror, so to speak.
Right. Second, it actively constructs those very gender differences. It helps create them, often in ways we don't even notice.
And third,
It reproduces gender inequality. And it does this by making these constructed differences seem completely natural, like they're just biology or destiny, not something society built.
so that's the ruse Kimmel talks about. Institutions create these differences, but then they kind of hide the fact they created them, making it seem like they were just there all along.
That's it, exactly. They set the rules, then pretend the rules are just part of nature. It makes inequality seem inevitable, just the way things are.
So it's not just showing us who we are, it's telling us who to be and making us think it was our idea. Wow, that's a powerful mechanism.
It really is. And one big way media reflects and then constructs these differences is by targeting specific consumers.
Based on gender.
Based on assumptions about gender, yes. Media producers have ideas about what men want and what women want, and they tailor messages accordingly. Remember Jesse Bernard's idea of his and hers marriage? You see the same thing in media. There are literally two medias.
Oh, you totally do see it once you look. It's everywhere, like magazines, right? Vogue or Cosmo for her, Maxim or Sports Illustrated for him.
Exactly. Movies, too. Chick flicks, like Bridget Jones versus action movies, or horror.
Books, romance novels versus pornography, maybe?
Or business books versus novels generally.
Yeah.
TV shows, soaps versus crime shows like CSI. Video games, clear guy games, and girl games.
And advertising must be tied right into this, targeting those specific audiences.
Absolutely. It's about creating gendered consumer groups.
Yeah.
But it's also important to remember intersectionality. It's not just his and hers.
Right. There's media based on race, too, like Bet versus WWE or different radio station formats.
And class, ethnicity, age. Think about movie ratings, for example. All these layers create multiple medias.
So the main point here, the big takeaway, is that both his media and hers media are part of this huge cultural machine designed to keep gender inequality going.
Right. First, media makes the differences seem bigger or more rigid than they might be. Then, it uses those differences to justify inequality, saying it's just a natural outcome.
That's the clever part, isn't it? Making the constructed seem biological.
Yes. But this leads to another important point, challenging the old view of us, the consumers, as just passive sponges.
Like we just soak it all up without thinking.
Exactly. Kimmel argues that the ruse, even with this constant barrage of media, never totally works. There are always fissures, contradictions, multiple messages hitting us.
And this is where the social science perspective really differs, right? It's not media doing something to us.
No, it's the interaction between us and the media. That's what shapes gender relations. We bring our own identities, our own experiences to whatever we watch or read.
We can interpret things differently, even push back against the intended message.
Absolutely. We can take all sorts of meanings. We actively, creatively, sometimes rebelliously act on the media.
Yeah.
We're not just passive recipients.
So the question shifts. It's not if media affects us, but how do media and consumers interact to create all these different meanings?
Precisely. Media is a major socializing institution, deeply gendered, just like family or school. It's woven into our lives in constant dialogue with who we are.
Which brings us neatly to thinking about media as a socializing force itself. You know, traditionally, sociology textbooks listed family, religion, education as a big three for socializing kids.
Right. The classic trio from the 50s to 70s focused on instilling values and norms. The agents were parents, teachers, clergy.
But like from a kid's perspective, that sounds like grown-ups, and more grown-ups. Kids know their friends, their peers, and yeah, the media are huge influences.
Totally. So the updated list, the one that makes more sense now, includes 6 primary institutions: family, schools, religion, and peer groups, the workplace, and the media.
And our understanding of socialization itself has changed too. We're not blank slates. We're active in the process.
Which helps explain why society is so diverse, even with these powerful institutions. It's this complex back and forth.
Yeah.
Media provides the materials for gender identity, helps maintain inequality, and then naturalizes it through that ruse.
And it works partly because media is just everywhere. We're swimming in gender images so much so that we often don't even notice them. Entertainment is often the main point, right? So we see images we identify with or aspire to or laugh at, but the socializing aspect is kind of hidden beneath that.
The sheer volume is mind-boggling. Think about the average American home. 3 TVs, almost 2 DVD players, 3 radios, multiple CD players, game consoles, computers.
Again, the time spent. Kids aged 8 to 18 spending 7 hours a day with electronic media.
Yeah.
7 hours.
It's huge. And TV is still dominant. Over 60% of families have the TV on during dinner. Half are constant television households. It's just always on.
And having a TV in the bedroom means kids watch even more, like an hour and a half more per day.
Plus, TVs are creeping into public spaces now, too, like restaurants and bars.
Yeah.
It's harder to get away from screens.
And what's the fallout from all this screen time? Reading seems to be taking a big hit.
The stats are pretty stark. 40% of 8-13-year-olds didn't read a book yesterday. 70% of 14-18-year-olds.
Nearly 1 in 5 17-year-olds said they never read for fun back in 2004, double the rate from 20 years before.
And proficiency is low. Only 4% of high school grads called proficient readers. 4 out of 5 families didn't even buy a book last year. It raises real questions about literacy, critical thinking.
Yeah, how we engage with deeper ideas.
So it all circles back. Media reflects gender differences, targets different audiences.
Yeah.
These his and her media uses become key ways we build our gender identities, and it ends up normalizing inequality. It's a powerful cycle.
Okay, let's really dig into this his and hers media idea, because Kimmel stresses it's not just separate, it's profoundly unequal.
You see it in the content, the consumption patterns, everywhere. Magazines are a prime example. Maxim, FHM, Sports Illustrated for him, Vogue, Glamour, Cosmo for her.
Books, too. Maybe more business or nonfiction for men, novels and stories for women, although that's a generalization.
It is, but the trend is there. TV channels, Spake TV, sports channels versus WE, Oxygen, Life.
Movies. Action and horror versus chick flicks, online stuff. Porn and poker versus shopping and email. Even music. Eminem versus Ani DeFranco. G.I. Joe versus Barbie.
It's a pretty clear divide in many areas.
Now, as you list those, I can almost hear guys listening thinking, yeah, that's my stuff, I wouldn't touch her media. And women thinking, hold on, I like some his stuff, and I don't like all of her stuff.
And you know what? Both reactions are valid on an individual level. But the overall pattern, the aggregate, is what's really telling.
What's striking is the asymmetry, right? Women seem to cross over into his media territory much more easily, or with fewer social penalties.
Definitely. Men, on the other hand, they generally wouldn't be caught dead consuming her media. It's just not done. And this isn't just a preference thing. It reflects that deeper inequality. Jesse Bernard's point about marriage his is better than hers often applies here, too.
His media is often treated as the default, the main event, while her media is maybe seen as secondary or niche. Women cross over more because, well, why limit yourself?
It's like Barry Thorne's playground research you mentioned. Girls could try to enter the boys' space, but boys faced serious ridicule for crossing into the girls' zone. Separate is rarely equal in these contexts.
And the evidence backs this up, doesn't it? Far more women like sports TV or even bands like Tool or rap or Grand Theft Auto than men like soap operas or Bridget Jones.
It's not just difference, it's the production of inequality playing out in our media choices.
Television history is a great case study for this. Back in the 50s, it was pretty segregated, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, Guy TV was weekend sports, crime dramas like Dragnet, Westerns like Bonanza, which, funnily enough, was a family drama with basically no women.
And Gal TV?
Daytime soaps, game shows, primetime sitcoms. Lucy Ricardo in I Love Lucy is the classic example, always trying to break out of the domestic sphere, failing, and returning to Ricky's forgiveness, reinforcing her proper place.
The stereotypes were blatant. Men were active, courageous. Women were caring, but often kind of ditzy housewives.
And research showed a clear correlation. The more TV you watched, the more stereotypical your gender attitudes tended to be. You absorbed those roles.
But things started to change in the 70s and 80s, right? With the civil rights and feminist movements pushing back.
Exactly. Critics pointed out how separate and unequal TV was. Hollywood's first response was kind of ghettoization. Shows for women like Mary Tyler Moore, or for black audiences like Sanford and Son, or The Jeffersons.
But the audiences didn't really cross over much then.
Not really. Men rarely watched Mary Tyler Moore. White audiences rarely watched the black sitcoms. But then, gradually, men's shows started getting more female viewers.
And the ensemble cast became more common.
Yeah, by the mid-'80s, shows like Hill Street Blues, L.A. Law, more racial and gender diversity became the norm. Think ER, NYPD Blue, Grey's Anatomy, CSI, Law and Order. Women started showing up in TV workplaces, police stations, hospitals, courts, mirroring real-world changes.
Which led to this idea of the feminization of primetime.
Sort of. Women started ditching the traditional female shows. Soap opera ratings dropped significantly. Women were crossing over more readily. As one TV exec put it, women have broader tastes and are more likely to watch what their husband wants than the other way around.
But as women crossed over, men started leaving network TV.
Yeah, especially younger men, 1834, their viewership dropped sharply. Executives got worried about this feminization because the standard network shows weren't holding on to the elusive male viewer.
The thinking was, men want action, women want relationships.
That was the stereotype. But Kimmel suggests it was more that men couldn't stand their media being polluted by too much female presence or focus.
Even though women make most consumer purchases, that ideology of men buy, women use is persistent.
It really is, despite market research. So now networks are scrambling, buying up game companies,
Right.
trying to lure those guys back from the internet and cable.
And Kimmel notes it wasn't just about gender equality pushing men away, but racial equality too.
The research he cites suggests that, yeah, white men seemed less likely to watch shows with black leads or diverse ensemble casts, even if the cast was still mostly white and male.
The data comparing teen viewing habits was striking too. Girls watched boy shows more than vice versa, and black teens watched white teens shows far more than the other way around.
It points towards a broader retreat from diversity in viewing habits for some groups.
Which leads to the creation of this man's zone in media, a space curated for guys.
And sports is the ultimate man zone, right? TV, radio, magazines, newspaper sections. It's an entire universe. Dozens of sports on TV daily, endless analysis shows.
And talk radio and TV, overwhelmingly male hosts.
And they often talk differently. Kimmel points to hosts like Stern, Savage, Limbaugh, often speaking with this sense of grievance, like they're victims, like they are taking over.
Compared to, say, Oprah's more empathetic style, listening to people's problems, though there are exceptions like Dr. Phil or Ann Coulter.
And late-night TV, still mostly men. Letterman, Leno, Kimmel, Conan. It creates this virtual room of his own.
Like a grown-up He-Man woman haters clubhouse, a place to be alone with other guys.
Exactly. A retreat into a space that reinforces a certain kind of masculinity, free from perceived intrusions.
Moving from screens to print, books, and magazines show similar divides, right?
Absolutely. Women buy way more books across almost all genres, except maybe war and sports stories. They buy something like 80% of all fiction, including books by authors often seen as guy writers like Tom Clancy or Tolkien.
And historically, men have kind of looked down on novels as feminine.
Yeah, Kimmel points this out. Think of Natty Bumppo in Last of the Mohicans sneering at books. The idea was real men act, they don't read. It connects to boys seeing English class as for sissies. Even Robert E. Lee thought fiction weakened the mind.
Then you have the rise of chick lit. Hugely successful, Bridget Jones's Diary was massive.
Sold millions, spawned sequels, films, tons of imitators. It's about modern urban women juggling careers and relationships like a literary Sex and the City.
And the attempt at ladlit in response kind of fizzled.
Largely, yeah. Books like High Fidelity did okay. But American attempts mostly failed as books and TV shows. The protagonists were often these commitment-phobic slackers.
Why did it fail?
Kimmel suggests two reasons. Women wouldn't read them unless the guy showed some sign of growing up, which they rarely did. And fundamentally, men just don't read fiction in the same numbers. It highlights that persistent gender gap in reading.
Okay, women's magazines. This is a really contested area. The traditional feminist critique, starting with Betty Friedan.
Right, the feminine mystique. The argument was that these magazines trapped women, pushed unattainable ideals of beauty, focused them solely on home and pleasing men, basically reinforcing their second-class status.
Making them passive, dependent, just ornaments or maids. Scholars like Tuckman, Kilburn, Naomi Wolf supported this view.
But then more recently, you get the complete opposite critique.
From anti-feminist commentators.
Yeah, arguing these magazines actually make women dissatisfied by pushing careers, consumerism, independence, calling them left-wing political weapons, misinformation. Danielle Crittenden wrote about women regretting prioritizing careers over marriage and kids.
So enslaving women to the home on one side, luring them away from it to their detriment on the other. How does Kimmel reconcile this?
He argues both sides are kind of missing the point because they only focus on one aspect. Women's magazines actually do both.
That's the polyvocality idea. Multiple voices.
Exactly. You pick up Cosmo or Glamour, you'll find articles on losing weight and articles on politics or climate change. They contain contradictions. This has always been true, making them sort of democratic, reflecting women's complex lives.
And the idea is women aren't easily duped because their lives are complex, they cross into male spheres like work, they have sexual agency.
Precisely. Now contrast that polyvocality with men's magazines.
It's like Maxim or FHM. They seem much more focused.
Monotonal is the word Kimmel uses. Covers are almost always scantily clad women. inside.
Yeah.
More naked women, articles on muscles, sexual prowess, all babes all the time, seems the only formula that works for that demographic.
And these new lad mags started as an anti-feminist backlash, right? To boost male self-esteem.
That's part of the origin story, yeah. And Maxim cracked the code for selling things like cosmetics to straight guys, just rapid and overt sexual imagery.
What about Men's Health? That was huge.
Hugely successful.
Yeah.
But it shifted to really target men's sexual anxiety. Promises of abs of steel, driving her wild, being bigger, harder, lasting longer. It plays on insecurity, you're never totin' enough.
And the best-selling issues are always things like the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue or Playboy's back-to-school issues.
Consistently. Featuring women who couldn't swim in those bikinis, or co-eds from top universities disrobing. The underlying message Kimmel points out is disturbing. Men are entitled to look at these women, and the women, even smart ones, are supposedly volunteering for it.
Efforts to keep these readers as they got older didn't really work. They didn't suddenly want articles on IRAs.
Apparently not. As one publisher said, they stay interested in girls, cars, and football. It reveals a pretty narrow focus.
Which brings up that big question again. Why are women's magazines relatively diverse and men's so single-minded? Why are men leaving TV as it gets more equal?
Is it fear of equality? A retreat into these pure masculine spaces when the traditional ones get diluted?
Kimmel argues the key is remembering the worlds aren't equal. Women enter men's worlds, military, business, but often on male terms. Even gender-neutral magazines like Forbes have a special women's issue. The default reader is assumed male.
It mirrors childhood patterns. Girls can play with boys' toys or do sports. Boys face ridicule for playing with dolls or hating sports. Women balance family and career. Men are still often expected to prioritize career above all.
So historically, equality has meant women entering male domains. And men's response has often been to retreat and become more defensive, more rigid about what real masculinity is.
Making those remaining pure spaces even more exaggerated in their masculinity.
Okay, let's shift to music. This is another area where you see these dynamics starkly. It's kind of amazing to see women singing along to really misogynistic lyrics, isn't it?
Like, I like big butts, or lines calling women bitches and hoes. It begs the question, where are the crowds of men singing lyrics about women's sexual entitlement over men? The imbalance is obvious.
Though pop fans might point to artists like Beyoncé or Shakira arguing women are expressing their own desire now, influenced by Madonna perhaps, is that equality or just adopting a male gaze?
That's the complex debate, especially when you look at rap and metal. Rap has long been criticized for misogyny, violence, predatory sexuality.
Right, that's the standard rap on rap.
Defenders argue it's an authentic expression of manhood for black youth facing emasculating racism and poverty. Even if it confirms stereotypes, it's seen as real.
But critics argue, and Kimmel highlights this, that the misogyny in rap isn't fundamentally different from the macho swagger and violence in heavy metal or hard rock.
Absolutely. Think 9 Inch Nails' Big Man with a Gun, or bands like Tool. Hard rock often ramps up the misogyny too.
And this reveals a double standard, doesn't it? We criticize black artists for things we often ignore or excuse in white artists.
We tend to hear the offensive stuff more easily when it comes from an other group. We let our own artists off the hook more easily.
Imagine reversing the genders or the target groups in those lyrics, Jews, Catholics, black people, sung about by whites.
The outcry would be immediate, right? Censorship calls, boycotts.
So Kimmel's point isn't pro-censorship, but about consistency. Why is it okay when aimed at women or gay people, but not other groups? What's up with that?
It points to a deep societal bias. Look at Nelly's tip drill video sliding a credit card through a woman's buttocks. Tip drill meaning an ugly girl with a good body, only good for sex from behind.
Hip-hop often portrays women as gold diggers, enduring anything for money. Pimps and Haws language. Nelly's pimp juice drink.
50 Cent's lyrics are blatant. Man, this hoe you can have her. When I'm done, I ain't gonna keep her. Even scholars like Mark Anthony Neal, who initially defended it, later expressed concern for his daughters being reduced to sexualized credit card machines.
And this tension sometimes erupts within the black community itself, like the Spelman College protest against Nelly.
Right. Students saying they couldn't support images that exploit women and portray them as oversexed, non-intelligent human beings.
So while there's no direct proof that listening to this stuff turns someone into a rapist,
There's a plausible accumulated effect. It paints this ugly picture of what guys supposedly think about women, normalizes sexist attitudes, makes them seem common, even funny.
like your son singing those lyrics without knowing the meaning, the fear is he will know someday and just shrug. That's the insidious part.
And the debate over whether rap or metal is worse misses a key point. Both appeal hugely to white suburban guys.
Which raises the question, why are white suburban guys so drawn to appropriating inner city culture, the music, fashion, language?
Part of it seems to be a search for authenticity. White suburban life can feel sanitized, pre-planned. They're looking for something real, something with passion, anger, frustration, like the characters in Fight Club.
Projecting authenticity onto inner city black youth, then consuming it through music, fashion, slang, like keep it real, pimp my ride.
And the market reflects this. 70–80% of hip-hop consumers are estimated to be white.
Yet they don't really show up at the concerts. It's a kind of cultural safari, consumed from a distance. Heavy metal shows are overwhelmingly white.
Consumption stops at the ghetto borders. And this cultural identification doesn't translate into political solidarity, like supporting affirmative action. You can like the music, but oppose policies aimed at addressing inequality.
And just like rap allows this vicarious expression of rage, so do video games, America's current favorite entertainment.
Especially games like Grand Theft Auto. Think GTA 5.
Yeah.
European immigrant comes to Liberty City for fortune, gets dragged into the criminal underworld.
The sales are insane. GTA V made $500 million in its first week. Halo 3 wasn't far behind.
They even did GTA Chinatown Wars, Billy. These narrative-driven action games are huge.
Video games have come a long way from Pong in 1972. Fastest growing entertainment segment, $40 billion globally in 2008.
Nearly 2 games bought per U.S. household annually. 3/5 of Americans play regularly, and most of those players are men.
Average age is 33, but the core appeal is teens and 20s. Teenage boys play way more than girls 13 hours a week versus 5.
Though both watch TV about 25 hours a week. And surprisingly, a third of Americans rank video games as the most fun family entertainment. It's truly mainstream now.
And there are different types, right? Console, online, MMORPGs.
Yeah, like World of Warcraft, with millions playing together online. Genre preferences show gender splits too. Sports games are big, but action-adventure like GTA and Halo are the most popular overall. Strategy games like Sims are also popular.
But the players are mostly male across the board.
Mostly, yes. The percentages vary. Competitive gaming is overwhelmingly male. Console games, 75% male. Online, 85%. Sports and adventure, close to 95% male.
Strategy games like Sims are the exception, where women have made inroads.
Right. And the action there is often domestic jobs, marriage, kids, cleaning. Which, as that sociologist found, many male students hated because it felt too realistic.
Huh. That's telling. And female gamers often feel like outsiders.
Yeah, Nina Huntman, a communications prof and gamer, talked about feeling uncomfortable in male-dominated gaming labs, getting the message it wasn't really for girls, even though she liked it for the same reasons guys did.
And the characters themselves are often extreme stereotypes.
Hugely exaggerated, male heroes with impossible muscles, looking like gay stereotypes, but presented as hyper-straight. Female characters, even strong ones, are hypersexualized. Barbie proportions, often needing rescue despite their skills, like Duke Nukem rescuing endless babes, or Lara Croft, the bombshell with a grenade launcher.
Some games even blend violence and pornography, like Panty Raider.
Where the goal is literally to use weapons to see and photograph women's underwear. It's objectification as gameplay.
For players wanting more interaction, there are the MMORPGs like World of Warcraft.
Elaborate fantasy worlds where millions play live, accumulating virtual status and goods that sometimes even have real-world value.
Which leads to concerns about toxic immersion, where the virtual life feels more real than actual life.
That's the worry Edward Castronova raises. And it highlights the core appeal of much guys' media escape. The illusion of power, control, winning the Super Bowl, fighting aliens.
Without the messy demands of real relationships or responsibilities. As that gamer David said, where else can you storm Normandy or fight the system and go out for a pizza when you're done? It's an easy escape.
Which brings us to pornography, another major media segment. And here, too, we see women entering a traditionally male space.
Women are consuming more porn, some even liking it, though it still feels unfeminine to many. But men aren't really watching female-centric porn from places like Femme Productions.
The pattern holds. Women cross over, men generally don't. And the industry is enormous, $10–14 billion annually in the U.S.
More than major sports leagues combined, more than the big TV networks combined. Wow.
Videos DVDs are $4 billion alone. Hundreds of new porn videos produced weekly. Adult venues outnumber McDonald's.
And the internet just caused an explosion, from 14 million pages in '98 to 420 million in 2008.
It's not some back alley operation anymore. As Larry Flynn said, it's run like a major corporation like GE or Mattel. It's big business.
And it has mainstream consumers. Polls show huge numbers of men view porn online, even at work. HR departments find it on work computers all the time.
It's become daily entertainment fare for many. Pornified is Pamela Paul's term. The stigma has lessened. But Kimmel stresses it's not harmless. It influences perceptions about sex, men, women.
Like advertising, if it didn't work, the industry wouldn't exist.
And there's psychological research suggesting exposure can change how people perceive even non-sexual images, linking them to sexuality. That's worrying.
Defenders often claim it's harmless because participants consent, that it shows an egalitarian erotic paradise where everyone wants sex all the time.
An apparent equality of desire. But Kimmel argues this equality is a fiction. The typical scene, immediate arousal, penetration, orgasm, is unrealistic.
It presents women's sexuality as basically the same as men's, predatory, impersonal, penis-focused, telling lies about women while maybe revealing truths about male fantasies.
Because reality is often different. Women's sexuality frequently involves emotional connection, something porn ignores. As that woman told Lillian Rubin, without emotion, it's just athletic activity, leaving her feeling empty.
And pornography tells lies about men, too. But lies men might want to believe. Like, that deep down, every woman secretly wants you.
It functions as a revenge fantasy for men who feel sexually unsuccessful or rejected.
It's hassle-free, vicarious sex, right? No dinner, no conversation, no rejection. No one ever says no, as that programmer put it. And even if they do, in that world, it means yes.
In a world where real consent, no means no, is paramount, porn offers a fantasy escape where male desire always triumphs.
That Tom Kaler performance piece captures this so perfectly. Coming home tired, reading a novel with a steamy scene.
And realizing he's turned on by the little blank dots on the page, not his actual available wife next to him.
Why? Because real intimacy is demanding. You have to talk, connect, deal with life's realities, kids, bills, emotions, commitment, maybe even performance issues.
Compared to that, the little black dots, they are easy. It perfectly illustrates the appeal of the easy escape offered by so much guys media. It makes few demands, offers the illusion of power and control. Escapism is the key draw.
Winning the Super Bowl, traveling planets, escaping reality to a world where men rule and life isn't so complicated.
But despite all this media focus on difference and inequality, Kimmel points out something surprising. The actual gender differences in overall media consumption are shrinking. They're often quite small.
We're becoming more alike in our media use, more like earthlings.
Increasingly so,
Yeah.
especially with newer media iPods, the internet, digital tech. The gender gaps are much smaller there. Social media sites like Facebook have roughly even male-female usage.
Internet use overall is pretty equal now, right? Men dominated early on, but that gap closed fast.
Men are slightly more online overall, but it's really about age. Older men are more online than older women, but among under 30s, women are actually online more than men.
There are still some differences in how people use it, though.
Yeah, men do more financial stuff online, buy more digital content like porn, search for info more. Women use email and social media more for relationship maintenance.
But the biggest difference is perception. Men think they're better online. Women underestimate their skills, even if they're equally adept.
That's what the studies suggest. It's a confidence gap fueled by stereotypes, not a skill gap.
Even in sports, a male bastion, there's convergence. Lots of women are sports fans now.
3/4 of men, half of women. Super Bowl viewership is huge for both. NASCAR, golf, NFL audiences are becoming much more balanced, 40–50% female for some major sports events.
But the divide persists in certain areas.
Definitely. Fake sports like WWE wrestling remain almost entirely male. And playing sports, virtually, video games like Madden, NFL, fantasy leagues, it's still overwhelmingly male territory. Fantasy sports are like 94% men spending hours on it.
And sports talk seems to be the biggest gender divider now.
That's what Kimmel suggests. Guys talk endlessly about stats, players, games. It's a bonding ritual, especially for straight men. It's replaced actually playing sports as the key gender marker.
Women might do sports, but they generally don't obsess over the stats like knowing Clemens' ERA or kids' triple-doubles. For women, it's an activity. For many men, it's an identity.
Which brings us back to Mariah Burton Nelson's book title, The Stronger Women Get, the More Men Love Football.
Implying that as women gain equality elsewhere, men retreat further into these male-dominated media spaces, like football, where women are less present.
It suggests men's anxiety about equality leads them to these mediated, fantasy worlds, games, porn, sports talk, where they can feel like masters of the universe again.
But women's equality comes at a cost in this unequal world. They enter male fields, but on male terms. Succeed too much, you're not feminine enough. Fail, and it proves difference, causes inequality.
It's a double bind.
So wrapping this up, what's the path to true gender equality in media and reality?
Kimmel argues it's not about eliminating gender difference itself. Difference isn't the enemy. It's about eliminating gender inequality.
So that Mariah Burton Nelson's book could finally be titled, "The Stronger Women Get, the More Men Like It."
Wouldn't that be something? Replacing anxiety with appreciation. A powerful thought to end on.
A truly powerful thought. And that concludes our deep dive into media and gender in Michael Kimmel's The Gendered Society. We hope this gives you, our listeners, some fresh perspectives on the media you encounter every day and how it subtly shapes our world.